Hey, everybody, and welcome to Mansueto Colloquium. I would say this is the first of our Colloquium series that we're planning geared towards bringing in both speakers and audience members, practitioners from around the community and the city. So we're really pleased to have Tiffany Smith to lead us off with this. Tiffany is presently a practitioner in residence at Mansueto, which is the new program we've created to bring people in for a few months at a time to engage with our students, with our faculty, and share their wisdom, and also to give talks to our community. And so Tiffany will lead us off. I should say, Tiffany and I have known each other for a long time, since before I was at Mansueto, and so it's always fun when you have somebody who you know to get to actually see what they look like on paper. So I have a bio here, and I'll tell you what it says, but then I'll tell you what I think is important. So Tiffany brings over 13 years of expertise in strategic planning, community development, and customer experience engagement, with a remarkable record of developing and implementing neighborhood strategies that promote economic equity and preserve affordable housing. Go on. She worked for many years at Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago, which is where she and I first met. She is now at a company called Heartland Next, which is a Black and woman-owned public affairs agencies, where she continues to work on housing. And she is a graduate of Northwestern, where she focused on organizational behavior. And I'll just tell you, the simpler introduction I would give is Tiffany is one of the smartest people I know working on housing, or let me say, she's one of the smartest people I know, and she works on housing. And so she's a great person I've always found to be able to combine, practical experience, but also great appreciation for and respect for evidence. And I think that those two things don't always go together. And so she's just always the kind of person who I think of as who do I want to go to when I have a question, like, would this work? What's going on over here? What do I need to know if I'm going to do research on this topic? She's just one of the first people I think of. So I really loved having her here as our practitioner in residence for the last few months, and I'm thrilled to have her lead us off in our new series. I should also say, in addition to being a graduate of Northwestern, she's a graduate of St. Ignatius High School. Ignatians in the crowd. Anyway, I could go on, but I won't, because then you won't be able to talk. So Tiffany, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. So don't mind my personal fan. Thank you so much for that, Chris, and all of you guys over here at the Mansueto Institute. It has been a blast the last 3 months getting to interact with the faculty brains that are in this building and on this campus. And I have learned so much. It's just, I can't recommend the program enough. And boy, oh boy, can't wait to see who the next urban leader in residence is going to be, because it is very, very fulfilling. So when you see it posted, I want you to apply. Anywho, today we're going to talk about building community intelligence. And so I will give you just a little background on why this occurred to me and said, we probably need to have some conversations. And it really stems from me coming from an environment, a corporate environment, outsourcing, and moving into the nonprofit space and not really understanding how the nonprofit world works, not understanding community engagement, not understanding how policies are developed and informed. And so as I was explaining to one of my colleagues from NHS, my first year in the role, I didn't say very much. I just listened, because I knew I was out of my depth. And mind you, I am one of those people that will jump in and figure it out in a minute, but I had a feeling you need to just sit back and be quiet. And so in that first year, I learned so much about the people I was going to be serving with, as well as those that I was going to be working with every day. And part of that is what we're going to talk about, what informs community intelligence. So understanding and fostering community intelligence is crucial. It's vital to enhancing community engagement, refining our policy development process, and advancing research. Community intelligence encompasses various facets, but more specifically, cultural literacy, emotional intelligence, and cultural intelligence, all woven together with the application of the community's history and its relationship to trauma. And that is what I think is more often than not missing in our process. So, or not. Just wanted you to do it. There you go. So we're going to cover just a couple of things, and don't be alarmed. We're not going to spend a lot of time on each section, so don't be alarmed. We're going to look at the components of community intelligence, the importance of community history, and then really kind of go over what I want and I hope you guys get out of this, which is how those elements work in our everyday process. So we're just going to go high level primer on emotional intelligence. I was an org behavior major and I firmly hold to those principles. So core concepts for emotional intelligence, really, you're going to be recognizing and understanding and managing your emotions, right? As you are being a person who is of high emotional intelligence, you are going to be self-aware, right? You are going to be conscious of not putting yourself in that situation, right? It's not about you. It's about really, what am I getting from the person that I'm talking with? It's about them. And empathy is vital to that. Cultural literacy. I had a wonderful teacher sophomore year at St. Ignatius College Prep, yay, who informed us about this book. And he said, everybody must get it. And I was like, why? And it was called The Dictionary of Cultural Literacy. How many of you have experienced that book? Okay, so put it on your list. You need to read it. Then cultural literacy really is going to be about understanding the shared values, right? Going beyond what we know to be our world. It is why I spent so much time traveling in my youth, younger years. Let me say it that way, not my youth. In my younger years, and for no reason other than it's there and I want to know, right? Cultural literacy, it helped inform that, and it has informed everything I have done since then. And it informs how I approach relationships, not only in the work world, but even in our personal relationship, right? And then cultural intelligence, which is really that capability to work effectively across different cultures. So if we dig into it even more, it is, for those of you who do want a reference, Daniel Goleman, 1995, actually presented the concept of emotional intelligence. And basically, there are 5 elements, right? So being self-aware, as we discussed, self-regulation, motivation, and social skills. You're going to connect with community members on a personal level. You're leading to more meaningful engagements, right? By being emotionally intelligent and demonstrating your awareness of self, but also regulating yourself so that you are not putting yourself in that conversation or in that situation. It is about the person with whom you are having that conversation. Opens up the doors for increased trust. That trust then can lead to more deeper conversations and more thought out policy and research structure. It does not like me. I got it. So cultural literacy, again, if you're looking for a reference, Hirsch in 1987 is the one that presented us with the concept of cultural literacy. And really it's about understanding the shared values, the beliefs. And I'm going to give you examples of this a little bit later, but making sure we're starting with the same vocabulary, I think, is super important. So it's crucial that we possess that cultural literacy so that we can communicate effectively and with respect. This comes later when we start talking about the history. And then cultural intelligence, which is similar, but really it's about cognitive understanding and a metacognitive understanding, which is really the strategies you use to engage with those cross-cultural engagements, emotional and behavioral components. It helps our practitioners find the nuance, not what's said, but more of what's not said in those conversations, and help us face those challenges across different diverse communities. So I've always been told I'm loud, but I'm hearing that I'm not being loud today. So I'm going to be a little bit louder. So we understand the premise of the emotional intelligence. Let's talk about integrating history. This picture is actually one of my favorite pictures. It is a picture of Seaway Bank, which is a bank that I went to with my grandma as a little girl with my Rothschild coat and my little gloves to get my first savings account. It is also the bank that was a big component with Black folks getting homes on the South Side. They were the ones, along with Liberty Bank and a couple others, that were giving mortgages and just saying, you know what, we're betting on you so that we could start our American dream on the South Side. But that wasn't everybody's experience, the Seaway Bank path, right? So historical trauma, and since I come from a background in housing, we're going to talk about it in the housing perspective. Really, system of inequities. I don't have to go down and rattle off the many things that have been done both in the private industry as well as done by government. Redlining and discriminatory lending processes. We are still to this day overcoming those things. Additionally, or as a result of that, there's a huge gap between the homeownership rates of Black Americans versus the Caucasian population. Even so much so, it's not even just Black Americans. We are actually falling behind Brown Americans as well, so Latinos. And one always has to ask the question, what is really going on here? So when they looked at the numbers in 2023, about 44% compared to the national average of 74.5 were the actual homeownership rates for African Americans. This presents longer term issues, in particular, acquiring generational wealth. And that is the basis for which most of us and most of our families continue on. And we'll get into that in a second. Additionally, the disparity in housing costs or values. On average, we're finding Black neighborhoods at $175,000 is that median home valuation. That is in Chicago, by the way. And then white neighborhoods at $300,000. The reason it is so, the reason you can get to that number so easily in Chicago goes back up to those first two historical traumas, which is the segregation. So years after legislation has been passed, years after commitment from government, city government, state government, federal government, county government, we still continue to live in one of the most segregated cities in America, in Chicago. So understand what that means, understand how that would make you feel. To know that I choose to be here. Maybe I'd like to go somewhere else, but I don't see a model for that. And when I go to meet with the realtor continues to choose the existing neighborhood rather than opening the windows and the doors for me to other opportunity areas. The other component I want to add in here too is the climate change and environmental injustices that we tend to see in our African American communities. So those of us who are Southsiders and who are Chathamites, we have a very interesting relationship with water. I was on a call about homeowners insurance last week, and they were like, "So Chicago, what's the issue there?" And we're like, "Water. It's consistently water. Yes, there may be fires. Yes, there may be winds, but overwhelmingly, the thing that is impacting the valuation of our homes, as well as our quality of life, are the water issues." And so, as we think about moving forward, and we watch what has happened to our neighbors in California, and particularly Altadena, which if you have not read up on Altadena, I highly encourage you do. It is one of the first places that Black and brown folks could actually buy their homes. My cousins, when they moved out of Watts, that's where they bought, because it was A, affordable, and B, they could, meaning they were able to get a mortgage in that area. So what's happened in the last couple of weeks out in LA has significant impact. Not just the trauma of what's happening in the moment with being displaced, but the trauma of family history and where are we going to go from here. We'll get back to that. It's not like me, does it? There we go. Perfect. So I said we'll get practical tools out of this. Let's look at 3 areas of sensitivity. And I'm going to use Chatham and Auburn Gresham as examples. One of them is density creating initiatives. That's a good thing, right? Am I talking to myself? Oh, by the way, I should mention, I'm highly interactive. It's not a class. You can totally talk back to me. So density creating initiatives in the city. That's a good thing, right? Right? It does depend, right? But for the most part, we look at these scenarios and go, okay, it's going to help us bring amenities, right? It's going to help give people more affordable housing. This is a good thing. So about 2 years ago, as we were going through the 79th Street redevelopment plan, there was a proposal for two buildings. And they were apartment buildings, and they were slated as affordable housing and putting people close to transportation. So they were ETOD equitable, transportation-oriented developments, right? And so on its face, we're like, okay, that sounds pretty good. As we were going through the community forums, we noticed a lot of pushback from existing residents. And I was stumped, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was like, why? Don't you think we're gonna get the grocery stores that you don't have? You're going to, get people that you're gonna get stores, you're gonna get all those things because you've got the now rooftops that you can to support that. And what I failed to appreciate were our longer term homeowners. So those like, for example, my dad, who bought our house in 1974. And particularly in Auburn Gresham, there's a significant number of homeowners who are second generation, third generation. Their parents bought those houses in the 60s. It wasn't even later on in 70s. In the 60s, these folks bought these houses. And so we said, okay, well, still, what's the problem, right? With density comes more traffic, right? And if the person has been living in that house and that's their family home, more traffic, well, that's not why we live on the south side. We choose to live on the south side so we can park in front of our houses, right? So we can have garages, right? So there isn't that much noise around and I can walk to the park. But if I don't want to walk to the park, I've got grass in my backyard that I can play in, right? Well, when you start creating density, that is definitely going to impact one's previous held assumptions. The other unspoken, and people were trying to find different ways of saying it and not seem NIMBY, was the affordable housing part of it. And so affordable housing translated in a lot of these meetings to not someplace for your kid to move back to the city so they don't have to go to the suburbs, right? Not translating into, hey, your grandson can actually, you can stay in your house, and your grandson can get the apartment down the street, and that way you have someone close to you. It translated into Section 8. And for those who are not familiar, Section 8 is basically a voucher system. And so folks that are getting public assistance for their housing. And I was kind of taken aback and I was like, wow, okay, help me understand. Again, first year, I only listened. Well, I actually asked my dad about this. And I said, what's the problem? And he goes, well, remember when we had projects in Chicago? And I was like, yeah. He's like, when they tore them down, I was like, yeah. Where do you think all those residents went? And I said, well, across the city, that's what the promise was. And he said, no, that's not what happened. So in their minds, in those people who had a longer term history within those communities, actually saw that those residents were moved to the south and west sides, some to the south suburbs. But not only did they move, they only moved those folks, they didn't move the resources with them. So in the period of about 2 to 3 years, they saw the median incomes in their neighborhoods drop dramatically and not the resources there to help support them. And so it wasn't a reflection of, oh, people from the projects, it was, we don't have any more to give to help. Unless you're bringing resources, we don't want any more. Send them to Lincoln Park. And literally that was a line out of, send them to Lincoln Park. On its face, it's like, oh, that's the very same thing the suburbanites used to say about us. And it's like, yeah, but when you understand that promises were made and not fulfilled, meaning we're tearing down these public housing facilities or projects, but when we do that, we are redistributing the residents, right? They will have the right of return, which they're not, and 2, there'll be resources. And so what you're finding in a lot of our communities, those resources never appeared. That right of return, if you drive down State Street between 40th, 39th Street, down to about 55th Street, those used to be housing projects. You'll still find lots of green vacant land. You find a wonderful tennis place over there though, but housing is very limited. They did not get their right to return. So when you take in that history, density creating initiatives, how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel? Do you want it? You do? Why do you want it? Totally tell me, why? There's no wrong
I
answer.
don't know. I feel like I feel like density creating initiatives is still good. having studied a little bit of like how density is brought about in these affordable rental initiatives, especially Section 8 housing, I disagree with the means of aid because they usually just make expensive housing and then subsidize it using government fund instead of making up housing that people can actually afford. So yeah, like I think the means of bringing density is not.
But if you are employing the model, right? And you are taking yourself out of the situation and you are that homeowner who's lived in that house for 50 years. And they've seen that the value of that home has appreciated, but not at the pace at the home in Albany Park. And it's the same darn bungalow. How does density sit with you?
Not
That's not great, right? Right. So we're having a different conversation. We need to have different conversations when we're talking about density creating initiatives, right? For a lot of folks, when we say affordable housing, you immediately think affordable rental. Is that the only affordable option for a domicile? No, right? We could look at worker housing and affordable home ownership, right? But for some reason, affordable housing has become synonymous with rental. And we get it. You start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. My parents got their apartment in Chatham. And then little Tiffany came along and they bought the house after they had that apartment. It's a cycle. So you do need a place for people who are coming back to the city to land. At the same time, if they don't have a place to transition to because the cost of homeownership is out of reach, then you're hustling backwards, right? You're never going to fulfill that need. You're never going to fulfill, where's Emily, that 126,000 gap that if you have not signed up for the Christman Fellowship, Christman Challenge, you should be doing. So affordable rental initiatives is what people hear when we hear affordable housing. So one of the things when we looked at 95th Street for their 95th Street corridor plan was, okay, when we talk about housing, what do you envision? And this was a community exercise and lots of word clouds, because I love a good word cloud. And one of the things they said, yes, I want my grandson to be able to move back to the community. I said, okay, what does that look like? And they're like, they should be able to buy a house like we did. Okay. Does it have to be a single family house? Like no. They could buy something else. Something that they can manage. Okay. So the conversation on the 95th Street corridor planning exercise, very different than the 79th Street conversation. The use of the word affordable housing was not seen with the negative connotation that it was on 79th Street because we had defined it out of the gate. Affordable housing, worker housing was going to be either rental or home ownership. And so as we got to the end, and that plan is actually out there on the Department of Planning website, as we got through the planning stages and we showed what type of house we want to see on this corridor, it was a mix. So you had a mix of condo townhomes, ownership, entry-level home ownership too, right? Because at age 25, were you trying to cut grass? I wasn't. So it's like, all right, baby step you in, combined with rental apartments, those rental apartments, and they made them closer to the public transportation at 95th Street, right? But it was because of that community engagement, people listening, not putting themselves in the, I need to get this done, and we need to create this density, and it's gonna be an ETOD development, okay, but let's get a feel for what this community wants. We may be able to make those meet all of our needs, but I need to hear fully without putting myself in that situation. Coming honestly, as in, I don't actually know what your needs are. Coming honestly from a position of, this is a very diverse community. So we've got a lot of folks that are greater than 60, and then you've got a lot of folks that are starting their families. So what do those needs look like? And taking all of that into account, right? Second, non-motorized travel. What does that look like? That's a good thing, right? We got air quality issues, right? Got too many cars. We're trying to get to our goal, decarbonizing, right? Well, protected bike lanes is one of the things that was up for discussion. And I like to ride my bike. I'm not one of those Uber people that will ride their bike in the wintertime. God bless them. But I respect that, right? We want to keep them safe. You put protected bike lanes in there, which means you're going to give up some street area, right? This is the middle of America and we do love our cars. We know this. We know this about ourselves. However, what would be another reason that you would be in favor of being in your car versus on a bike or taking public trans? I'm sorry, say it loud. Safety, right? So we were having a conversation, and this had to do with the extension of the red line about what one of those stations would look like right after Chicago State. And the people who were facilitating the conversation, super well-meaning, loved them, great exercise. But the folks from, I think it was Metro, if I remember correctly, they were very frustrated by how much safety was brought up. Well, what's the station gonna look like? Are there gonna be phone booths there like you have on a college campus? Are there gonna be cameras there? What's the lighting gonna be like? Seriously, we all got stuck at the safety thing, not about, what does the design look like? What is the accessibility? Lighting, access to public safety officials, getting help when you need it, and cameras were the top priorities. Does that mean folks are not in favor of decreasing our carbon footprint? No, right? Their priorities are different. But unless you take a step back and listen and go, wait, why are we spending so much time talking about safety? What is really going on here? And creating that space for that conversation, you're not going to get to where we need to be. I don't mind a public transportation situation, right? I'm lucky. I live 2 blocks from the red line. Perfect. Until we start talking about air quality, but perfect, right? I can get anywhere in the city in about 25 minutes, whether I'm driving or I'm taking the train. It just depends on the time of day. But we also know there is this feeling, because it's actually not really supported by data. There is this feeling of an increase in crime in the city of Chicago, when in fact we've actually had a decrease, but what else? Anyway, there's this feeling, right? That there's this sense of, I need to take my car, it's not safe, I don't know. Yes, it makes sense, and yes, it costs me more money to drive versus, me taking the train, I'm paying for parking downtown. This doesn't make any sense. At the same time, emotionally, because that's an emotional decision, we're choosing our cars rather than getting on public trans. So when we have conversations about air quality, when we have conversations about going green and we need to meet these carbon decarbonization goals, we need to take a step back, right? And say, how is this impacting that end user? We know what the goal is. I think everybody agrees with the goal. But the day-to-day and how we transition there, problematic, right? One of my colleagues that I used to partner with is actually in the room, and they've got they had a decarbonization project, right? And me, tree hugger Tiffany, and they were like, okay, so you're gonna get rid of your gas oven. And I was like, from my cold, dead hand. Tree hugger, I love a good tree. At the same time, a macaroni and cheese does not come out the same when it is not in my oven, in my gas oven. That's not anything that is logical, right? That's an emotional thing. It's also a cultural thing, right? And so it's how do we then get people beyond that, right? We may have to take a few extra steps. We may have to do some cooking classes and go, okay, blind taste tests. It's like the Pepsi challenge, right? Blind taste test. Which one was done in the gas oven? Which one was done in the new modified electric convection oven, right? Because a lot of us still have memories of the first electric ovens in the 70s and 80s, and you're like, no way, no way, no way, right? Whereas you cook now in an electric or convection oven, different approach. So how you go about convincing people and how you go about people accepting and embracing that policy really is going to depend on how you listen to what is really their barrier and what's also not being said. And then also investing and taking the time to go that extra step and go, okay, how do I demonstrate this to you? How do I show you the effect and the impact of this? So that even as I'm showing you this, it's giving you an opportunity to show me what I overlooked. And being open to the fact of, I may have overlooked something. Okay. And then third, again, I love to hug trees. Don't you love trees? Right? They are so good for you. They clean our air. Why would my neighbors be angry about the city planting trees for them? Anybody?
They get leaves all over the street.
Leaves all over the streets. What's another one? The roots
The
in your pipe.
city's not taking care of the trees they have.
There you go. City's not taking care of the trees they have, right? So you're calling 311 going, no, for real, I need you to prune this tree. Well, we only do it when they're dead or in the August. You're like, yo, it's raining. It's gonna fall on somebody's car. We get it. We'll send somebody out there to look at it. I'm not down in the city because they're doing an incredible job with an impossible situation. However, though, when you plant that tree in front of my house, even though it's on the public way, I actually have responsibility for that tree, right? So having the conversation of we need to clean our air. West Chatham, which is where I live, has actually some of the worst air in the city. Never knew it. I was like, why is my asthma so bad? Because I live in West Chatham. And I will be very honest, my father cut the tree down in front of my house that we grew up with. And then they planted another tree. And then I had that tree cut down. Why? Because they continue to grow over my house. The leaves continued to come down, and before we could even get them, they were clogging the drain, right? Practical things. Didn't mean I didn't love the tree. There's also a debate about, are we only planting male trees? And so that's also leading to a pollen situation, but we won't go down that road. But it's a problem. And then there is a program that is actually willing to plant trees for people in their backyards. Why would I not want the tree in my backyard?
The roots. Heights.
Your roots, right? Also, you are responsible for trimming that tree. It may take the city a while if it's on the public way, but they are responsible for trimming that tree. You have to trim the tree in your backyard. And while it is good for you, it will help cool down your neighborhood. It will help clean the air, all of the things we want. It's problematic from a cost perspective, right? So if we go back to some of those things that we heard about our housing value being less than the larger population, are us getting homes later, right? And there's one more, I can't remember what the other one was. But those challenges present even larger challenges when it comes to maintaining the home. So while it's a good feel, and woohoo, we're Arbor Day and we're doing great things for the environment, grandma, who is on a fixed income living in her bungalow, does not want another financial obligation on her property. So then the question becomes, do we not plant the trees? No, we gotta plant the trees, otherwise we can't breathe. So then as we're developing the policy, do we then need to take a step back and go, okay, if we are putting budget in to plant the trees, do we also need to budget for maintenance of the trees? Or budget in a way that there is a special account that is used, so we kick in a certain percentage or to help them out with managing the trees, right? Because that tree is not just for that one house's benefit, right? That tree is for all of our benefit. But on the face of it, if you just ask them, do you want a tree in the back? No. Yes.
Question about affordability, which you just mentioned. When you were talking about changing everything trying to compliance systems to work. So is that something that's also getting?
That's an excellent point, right? Because if you look, there's a lot of rebates out there, right? But that means you have to have the money up front to buy it. Okay. All right. Oh, there we go. So let's put it together what we were just talking about, right? We're going to be fostering emotional connections, right? We're going to recognize that emotional landscape of that community. What's the history there, right? Do we have an older population that may have trouble maintaining things? Do we have a population that is, when we are in a challenging economic situation, they are actually more susceptible to losing employment first, right? Do we have more service workers there, which is also going to be something that is impacted directly by the economy? If I've got waiters and waitresses and we're not going out because our budgets have gotten so much smaller, that's going to affect their households, right? So understanding what is really driving that community and understand that landscape. Then also engage in educating, right? You've taken the first step. You decided to spend your lunch hour with me, right? Learning and being open to knowing that we don't know so much. And how we do things is the result of our life experiences, what our parents have taught us, what we've grown up to know to be that the right way to do certain things and being open to learning other ways of doing things. I always use the bidet as a really good example, right? I was 17 years old the first time I got to use a bidet, and I was like, what is wrong with us in America? This is the best thing ever, right? But if you're not open to learning that, you're gonna flip out and go, why is there liquid coming out? What am I supposed to do with that, right? So being open to, there are maybe better ways to do it, and probably are. And there may be different ways that are just as good. It may not be better, but it's just as good. And so let's see how we can support that other way of knowing. And then also enhancing our cultural intelligence. So making sure that we're conducting workshops on cultural intelligence and inclusive practices. I know that whole DEI has gotten a little out of favor, but there is a reason why inclusivity is so important and why it is such a hot topic. Inclusivity, is way more profitable if you really do the math. When you work to include people in the process, include people and account for and make accommodations for those that may not on its face be able to complete the same tasks as others, you actually are going to put yourself in position to address and serve a larger section of our community and of our world, actually. And then understanding the historical context. So this actually came to me when I was at the Reclaiming Vacant Properties conference this past year in St. Louis. And our team was looking at the decline of middle neighborhoods in Detroit, Chicago, and St. Louis. And Detroit was very anomalous. You couldn't even, it didn't even fit into the category of middle neighborhoods in the city anymore. You couldn't compare it. Chicago and St. Louis were a bit more on point, and we could compare some of the metrics between the two successfully. But when you just look at the numbers, it didn't really tell the story. So as we were presenting the information, Chris Hoff is the researcher who pulled that data for us with the National Community Stabilization Trust and put it together for us. We actually said, you know what? Everybody get up and talk about your town and what these numbers are truly saying. So one of the sections that we looked at was Chatham, right? It is where I was born and bred. I am a second generationer and I am very proud of it. And you will hear me say it like 4 times. Chatham was once a little Camelot. It really was where the Johnson family lived. It was full of folks that were entrepreneurs and pretty much in the higher economic strata in the Black community. It was also the place where city workers lived and your bus driver lived and your mail carrier lived. Full scope. There was a place for everyone in Chatham. And Chatham has experienced a significant decline since the 80s and 80s, 90s. It's been in decline. And when I say in decline, it's in median salaries or household income. It's in decline on, well, it was in decline on medium household values, but it actually turned a corner and then started shooting upwards, which is awesome. But when you compare it to the larger city median income, it's still huge gap, right? But then you also saw the thing that we did see increase, which is crime. Public safety challenges, right? And so trying to explain the numbers about the aging and people moving out of the neighborhoods and things of that nature, you kind of had to put it in context. And so I talked about government employees in Chatham. Chatham was home to a significant number of county employees, city employees, and state employees. Like literally, you could just throw a dart. And across, using my street as an example, fireman, a detective, my dad was a city employee, 2 school teachers, like literally, the neighborhood was built on government employees. It was reliable income. So when you were getting that mortgage, they knew, well, the government's not gonna pay you, not gonna pay you. So hey, there you go, you're a good bet. But then we went through this period in the 90s and the early 2000s where we decided government was too big in the city and we couldn't afford it. So when you look at the distribution, and I am so glad that they do this now, if you're data freaks, go on to the City of Chicago's website. They actually list what percentage of population comes from each neighborhood on there. You can actually see it now. But we start to see that decline significantly. And then you had people going into the private sector. So what we find now is the children of those government employees who may have inherited those houses or lived down the street from their parents don't make as much as their parents did at the same age. 90s, 2025. How is that possible? But we do have to maintain those homes. And you don't have as much job security as you would in a, I'm doing air quotes because boy, oh boy, are we learning a lot this year, in a government job historically. So you were actually very subject to maybe you won't have that income next year. And what does that do to maintaining that household? So Chatham is a really good example of the numbers require a story. If you don't understand what happened in that community, it just looks like everyone just gave up. And that's not what happened. The people who were the money makers have retired and they're older now, and we have to help take care of them. The hospitals are not in their community. So you're actually coming over here to go to the hospital, or you're going over in South Shore if you want to go to Advocate, or if you're going over to Oak Lawn. But the healthcare facilities aren't even in their backyard, with the exception of our new arrival on 79th Street, the Healthy Lifestyle Hub. There is healthcare finally in Auburn Gresham in a one-stop shop. And it's UIC Health who does it 6 days a week. Wonderful. So our seniors don't have to go so far. I want to draw your attention though to when you look at CMAP data, because we love data, you will notice that there is a higher percentage of people who identify as having disabilities in your Black and brown neighborhoods in the city. And it just begs the question. I want somebody to do some research on that. It begs the question, what is going on? Is it that because they're not close to healthy health facilities and things of that nature? Is it because of the quality of the air? Is it because of, what is the driver there, right? But I found it so striking that, and it was a huge difference. Even Woodlawn, which is very close, right? It is right here next to a pillar of health research and just world-renowned, world-class healthcare. They actually have a higher percentage of people who identify with disability than you will find in a north side neighborhood. Why is that? Questions we should be asking. Anyway, so I am going to now ask you guys. There we go. Given that we understand these attributes, what do you think in your research or in your policy development, where do you see opportunity? Anybody? And don't be shy. Otherwise, I'm gonna pick on you. Yeah.
Neighborhoods with the same issue working together. Because they have shared.
Values and cultures. That could be definitely an opportunity there, right? Embedding. So a lot of you know, or Chris alluded to, I used to work at an organization called Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago. And we were embedded in the neighborhood strategies team in community. So across the South Side, there was a person that was specifically for Inglewood. There was a person that was specifically for Greater Chatham, right? There was this person that was specifically for Chicago Lawn when I first started there, right? Because to understand what the motivations are, why there isn't possibly acceptance of a new process or protocol, you need to be there to understand it. So when you're developing your research protocols and the budget for the research protocols, which I just learned about quickly, it's going to be really important that you factor in that community engagement part and you don't skimp on it. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add to that, I think that that is critical when any entity, organization, or task force team gets started. One thing is people that belong in the neighborhood, do with what we do. We have to be on board. We have to find great ways to allow people to understand that the work that we're doing is real. It's way too often, like back in the day, I could knock on your door and tell you about a community benefit. We really can't do that same thing anymore. People don't open the door like they used to. So we do other creative things, putting flyers on the block, telling people, hey, we're gonna have coffee on the corner. We're about to have a bowl and ice cream board and tell you about resources so that people can start layering resources.
Thank you. Piggybacking on that one, right? So when we're talking about budget and embedding and engaging and not skimping on the community engagement, it's not a one and done. Again, I spent a whole year not saying a doggone thing, just sitting there taking notes, right? It's gonna be super important that you engage at the local, hyper local level. So there's a bunch of intermediaries in the city and in the country that will say, oh, well, we'll distribute out. More often than not, that money's not getting to the people who actually are the boots on the ground, who can actually affect the situation and can give you the true insight, right? We were super lucky when I was doing the neighborhood strategies team, because we got to embed in such a way that, for example, everybody knows I love a good property tax argument. We were talking about the property tax sale. And I kept screaming from the mountaintops, Sarah, who is NHS's policy director, you've got to do something. Look at all these houses on the south side. They owe $2,000 and they're about to lose their house in the property tax sale. She's like, what? Are you kidding me? No, that can't be it. Like, so we pulled all the data. And then we showed her who we were calling and who we were visiting and said, look, this guy's a senior. He owes $1,500 on his doggone property taxes. There's not a grant for that, but he could lose his house for that because they don't have fixed income. Or maybe his wife died and she's the one that used to do it. And now he doesn't know what he's doing. So we have to get to him. In fact, WTTW did a story on it. Because we were so embedded, she could then see, she could put a face to a name to the problem. And because we were so embedded, people were willing to talk to us and tell us that. Because having your house go to the property tax sale, ain't nobody want to talk about that in public. But if you have established that relationship, they know you, they see you in the jewel. Tiffany, I'm like, oh man, I'm just here to get some steak. I'm not trying to, okay, right? Because you're embedded, because you took the time to actually listen, to show up even when it wasn't for your stuff. Randomness. Everybody's like, why are you at all these CAPS meetings? Like, need to understand. Oh, such and such is doing this backyard conversation. It's not, how does that have to do with housing? Support, right? Even if it's not directly tied to it, you need to be digging in there because actually that's where you're going to get your insights. Yes, ma'am.
I'm with the Greater Roseland Chamber. Oh. So we have the challenge of one, we got the red line coming. I've been working on that committee since 2009.
Yeah.
And the community is still going, yeah, right. They don't think it's gonna happen. There's a whole lot of things that are happening, namely what you guys are talking about now as far as getting the word out, getting people activated, getting people to go get the training to apply for these jobs. We are beating our heads against the wall, trying to get people to really take this serious. So outside of actually going door to door, which I don't have the capacity to do
anymore. Yeah.
I would love to know how we can, because I don't want the community to miss out on this opportunity.
Yeah.
One, the community has suffered from gross disinvestment for decades. And the fact that transportation was cut off at 95th Street, was intentional and it's disgusting. But anyway, I won't have that heart attack today. We gotta do something. Housing prices, with this equitable transit-oriented development. To me, it means gentrification.
It can't,
Yeah,
right?
but people,
Doesn't
the
have to.
housing market is already out the roof. And how will people that lived in the community afford to, buy these homes, these new homes that are being built? And we can't underprice the houses because then that interferes with the whole market. So, and that's one of the reasons I came in today. I'm looking for solutions. Like, what do we do?
Can I give you an example of you can't knock on everybody's door? So back in the beginning of the housing crisis in 2008, I was not on board with NHS. It was my former leader, Deborah Moore, who
That's my
actually,
buddy.
there you go. Anybody who's worked in housing in Chicago knows this woman. And so she actually partnered with Freddie Mac, a GSE, in the middle of the crisis to say, what are we gonna do? We cannot lose all of these homes. These are generational homes in Auburn Gresham. What are we gonna do? And so Freddie Mac actually funded the NHS Chicago at the time in 2008 for a program called Block by Block.
Okay.
And a block by block of Auburn Gresham, the premise was they're not gonna open the door for a stranger, even if they're losing their house, and you say, I can fix it. They will, however, talk to their neighbor. They will, however, and it may take a couple tries, they will though open up to their neighbor, the trusted advisor, right? So leveraging kind of what Nicole alluded to, those block clubs. Now, mind you, block by block of Auburn Gresham is not your, it's not your standard block club. Keep me honest, 13 blocks? 13 blocks. So it's a conglomerate of blocks, and they each have block captains. But the reason those houses were preserved over there was they held on to each other and rolled that ride together. And they said, no, you're not gonna lose this house. I know your mama had this house. You can't lose this house. Let us help you. Come and talk to these people. And so to me, it's a similar situation where, okay, we may not have a specific block club, but do we have like one or two that we can say, I need grant dollars to pay these people to go and do that, right? Because that's the other part of this, right? When you're spending budget on the research, on the policy development initiative section, making sure that you're spending the money in that community. Training, right? Those residents who are part of those block clubs or who are part of those hyper local community organizations. So it's a win-win, right? They're walking away with some additional technical experience and maybe a new pathway that they didn't even know, like, huh, who knew? That's part of it, right? It's not just, I want to come down here and get my data. Okay, bye. Right? It's no, we're in this together. Let me share some things with you. Take what you want. I'm not going to force it on you, right? But using community organizations at that super local level. And so you're already a super local level person, we already know this. And so it is, take it down to the block club level, take it down to the beat level, right? And so everyone talks about block clubs or old lady, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm 50 now. And yes, I am a member of my block club, but I was a member of my block club before I was 50. What I will say is we have to reimagine them. We can't call them block clubs anymore. My block, my hood, my city for a while was doing a block club initiative. Not sure if they're still doing it, but go to their website and see if it's there. They were actually training folks on how to start block clubs. And quietly, we were safer when we had block clubs. One person looking out, 3 people looking out. Okay, right? One person making the phone call because they heard, gunshots in the distance. Okay, we'll get over there, Ms. Smith. 5 people making the phone call going, no, for real. I'm gonna need you to sit in a car. Okay, we'll be on our way, right? So there is strength in numbers. My dad was a union man, so I'm strength in numbers, right? We're gonna hold on to each other and ride this roller coaster together kind of situation. No, we're not gonna call them block clubs anymore, right? But we will call them associations. We will call them hangout groups, kind of to the point where Nicole alluded to, and we used to do this actually in Chatham, we do coffee with a cop on the corner, right? And so very visible, positive loitering, at the same time acknowledging you see me as a person, you're not seeing me on the worst day of my life. And I'm seeing you as a person and acknowledging and thanking you for the service you're doing, right? So it was put together though, not just by one block club, although one block club definitely was the impetus there, Miss Eunice, yes. But it was also the community association, right? So Park Manor Friends, right? Chesterfield Community Council, right? It's not just the block club, right? It can be a little bit bigger. Did that help?
We did we started the Block Club Presidents Group. And we started a principals brunch. So we get with all the principals who have contact with all the children, the children that we can hopefully funnel information through
Yeah.
that opportunity.
And there are a number of workforce development initiatives. I get it though, but it gets drowned out, right? There's just so many, and particularly now that the super, what do you call it, computing. Come on, I'm showing my age thing now. What's the thing that's coming? There you go, quantum computing. I'm like, I'm showing my age. The quantum computing lab is coming. That is a windfall for any kid coming out of school right now.
Yeah.
And being at the forefront of that. And they need everything in that place. So I'm aligned with you on this. And it is really about working hyper locally. There is a workforce development has an office on 79th Street. Chicago State is now doing those things. So really engaging at that level. Did I see your hand?
I was just wondering, how do you, what suggestions do you have to get the young people involved in this block?
So I've learned that I'm not as cool as I thought I was as cool auntie. However, I think I see one of my former community engagement people in the audience, and she is a millennial, so she's closer. Some of the things you did in Inglewood to get the youth out, give me two.
The local community-based organizations, programming, volunteer, talk to parents. Park districts, I joined in PACs, the Park Management Council, where kids work. So it's been being really chance because we have workshops at the Park District. I got a chance to interact with people. So much so, I was doing at the police station to the point I got involved with their parents and Girl Scouts, bringing kids to our workshops.
And I think you'd be amazed at how many youth, so the woman that's sitting next to her, Miss Love, now her poor child had no choice in the matter. She got drug along from a very, very small age. Miss Kennedy was always out in service, helping in the community. But now that she's older, she actually chooses to do it, right? It's a muscle that has been developed. Me as a child, walking up the stairs, knocking on doors with my daddy when it was time to do something in the community. There's a reason I do what I do, right? I learned it at a very young age. So even if it's not directly the kid, it is the parent instilling in them and going, oh, no, we have activities for the kids to do as well, right? One of the things I'm most proud of when I was at NHS is we created a program called Housing You. And Housing You really took people through the home ownership process as a cohort. And it was after work. And so, wintertime, folks are like, dude, do I have to come at 6 o'clock in the evening? Yes, you do, but bring your child, right? So we had activities for the kids to do while their parents were actually working on creating a stable home and buying their first home for them. After a while, the kids were sitting in their laps going, but wait, what's that mean? And so they were then starting to understand the process. Integrating stuff for the children to do in the stuff that we want their parents to do is vital. Yes.
Programming where we're helping you to realize that a lot of families who may not own the property, it may not inspire their child to do it. So when you start teaching real estate classes, do a lot of real estate bingo, teaching them concepts, showing them pictures of plots, showing them how they can see what's on a home versus on the places of home, beautiful buildings, giving them a vision to be able to see something miraculous that can happen in the neighborhood. So you reach the children by coming up with fun, interactive, innovative games that they can play. Even some of the technology and STEM things and building, we're about to build houses.
I love it. Gamification, I love it. Other questions or thoughts?
I do have to, I hate to.
Oh, is it time?
It is time. I hate to break up the formal part of our presentation, but I have a
there is time after this for another 30 minutes or so to informally discuss. Like, please stick around, have conversations, meet people. That's part of what we like to do here. But please join me in thanking Tiffany. One James plug, because you mentioned it. There is for current U Chicago students, if you're a current U Chicago student, we are doing this year a housing policy challenge. We're encouraging you to look on our website. We're trying to actually, speaking of the youth, student source or a source for students, an opportunity, ways that we can solve the housing crisis in Chicago, which is 126,000 plus affordable units that you're short. So please, students, look on our website, be part of this conversation and sign up.
And to clarify, that 126,000 units, that's on the uber affordable. We're not even talking about the worker housing. That's on the, what is it, 30%? What's the number, Emily?
Yeah, less than 30%.
Right, so we're not even talking about the worker housing, so that's just a drop in the bucket. But yes, I need all of your brilliant brains on it because we're not gonna solve it with just the current practitioners. Have a great one. Thank you guys for coming out.